Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open the emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in ourselves and in our relationships. I'm your host, Tara Wages, and I am so excited to be here with marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis, and they are the founders of the Connection Codes, which is the blueprint to human connection. Today, we are going to be talking about, I'm just going to say it's our favorite topic. Can I say that? Mm-hmm. Do I have permission?
Yeah.
We are going to be diving into sex, and we're going to be sharing more specifics on some of the emotions that we encounter in our sexual experiences. We have a whole podcast as kind of a beginner and opening to all of the different emotions with sex, and you can find that on our website at connectioncodes.co/sex talk. But today, I mentioned earlier that I have fear in sex because I like to be in control. Mm-hmm. I want to very much be like this strong lady that just like is put together. And I feel like sex goes against everything that is. And I can remember early in marriage, just like, and not even early, probably 7 years in, looking at Wes one night, and we were just in conflict about sex, as many of us experience often, and saying, I'm a lady. I'm a lady. Like, don't you want to be? He was like, yeah, a lady in the street and a freak in the bed. And in that moment, like, of course, I just died laughing, but I was like, I don't know how to be a freak in the bed, you know? And so I thought, I'm not the only one that's experiencing this. And I know y'all just bring freedom. You bring freedom to sex.
So is that
world?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I just dived right in. I'm just so excited to talk about it.
So I'm wondering if that's the title of this podcast, Freak in the Bed.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to be in the bed. I try to always emphasize
that's
that.
True.
It could
That's
be in the backyard.
Right.
The
front yard.
If you're careful.
Oh,
We have a big front yard with a lot of trees.
Yeah.
So
Front porch. Right.
I like that.
So, that's an interesting topic that actually we had a chance to have lunch before we aired this podcast. And so we got talking about this over lunch, and that kind of led to us saying, man, we need to do a podcast about this. Yeah. Just the idea of just letting go.
Yeah.
And you know, what I thought about was just the wounding that happened in our first few weeks, first few months of our marriage. And I think that for me, I definitely didn't feel safe. And of course, I didn't understand pleasure.
Right.
So I didn't know that part of the whole experience of pleasure is to be able to relax and to let go. And so I love that we're talking about this because, and we were even saying over lunch, like, is this just a female thing or is this a male thing? So I love that we're going to get to talk about both sides of it. But for, of course, Tara and I, we're thinking about the female side that, and I think, doesn't it go back to even as young women, young girls, we're taught to be ladylike, right? To be proper. And so even you in your laughter, Tara, when you said a lady, how did you say?
A lady in the street.
A lady in the street and a freak
in the bed.
And like, just that whole idea that when you are taught at a young age to be proper or to be a young lady who, speaks softly and, just always has her hair combed or whatever it was that you were taught, how do you then in your intimate relationship just let go? Like, and even for you to say that, like a freak in the bed, what does that even mean? Right.
Well, so that comes from a song, just so y'all know. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, honey.
I'm sorry.
Do you know this, Glenn?
I'm sorry.
Do you know?
Yes. You want me to sing it? We've listened to that CD a number of times in our playtime.
I also love that you're calling it a CD right now.
Okay.
I will say it did come out on CD.
Yes, we have it. Yeah.
Tell me a little more. I don't. Who's the?
Dun-na, dun-na. Is it that one?
Oh,
A lady in the
Usher.
street, but a freak in the bed.
Is it Usher?
It might be Little John
Okay.
featured on an Usher song. I can't
Okay.
remember. I just know I've heard it a lot of times.
Okay, well, you're about to sing it, so. Okay, all right. So it came from a song.
Yeah. Yeah. But let me just mention, and I vacillate on this, I can argue both sides, but I think the majority of the time that I say that I think that sex is more vulnerable for males in this culture than it is for females. And it's a different experience. I get that. And it's hard to compare apple to apple. But we tend to think that it's more vulnerable for females. But my experience, having sat with, thousands of people, is I don't know men who are, they may be comfortable being nude, but to actually be free because, we always say that sex is such a multiplier. So, if somebody gets hit with fear, they experience it a certain way, but then if it's fear in sexual interaction, that's a multiplier. It's much more intense. So, and again, I'm not willing to fight on that hill, and I vacillate back and forth, but we could just say that sex is vulnerable across the board, whoever
Yeah.
it is.
Well, it would almost be fun if our listeners would, comment or send us. How does that work, Tira? Do they send us an email or whatever? Because I do think it's like a thumbs up or thumbs down, because I think that I feel so strongly about it that I want to just argue how hard it is for a female to be vulnerable. But then I know from all the conversations we've had that it's almost like I don't know if it's in a self-protection way, but we almost think, no, it's so much easier for guys.
Right.
When that is such an unfair judgment because, and I think back to our early married life, I just assumed you knew what you were doing. Yeah. And I felt so strongly, like in such a judgmental way, like you should have known. And I'm like, what in the world? Why would a guy just know how to pleasure me? You know what I mean? It's like, that is ridiculous in so many ways. And to know my own body is my responsibility. And to understand and to learn my pleasure points, it's my responsibility. But even that vulnerability side, it's like, I think that yes, girls are taught to be proper, but I think we see guys, even at a young age as, they whatever, they burp more freely or, they can run around without a shirt off. So look, they just have it so easy. But I think that's been such a damaging judgment on men to say that in the bedroom, they've got it all together, or in sex, they've got it all together. That is so unfair because there is such a level of vulnerability, and to really let go. And I know that we kind of started this conversation over lunch in just Tira and I talking about, like for so long, I was, definitely felt like I was supposed to hold it together in sex and didn't realize that the damage that was doing for me.
Right.
Like to have a dynamic orgasm, you've got to be able to first relax, right?
Yeah.
So that's a huge one. But then to even let go of yourself but you got to process a whole ton of emotion to get there.
Absolutely.
In such a big way.
Yeah.
And to be able to talk about it with your partner and to be able to talk about the fears or just to put it all on the table and hearing from them as well is so powerful, because I think that in the processing of the fear for me, and just, it's kind of like, well, what is the fear? Like, what am I thinking is going to happen if I let go? Like, is there a level of embarrassment in it that, the fear of just, even yelling, like, and it's so interesting because, as many of you know, we've had 4 children. So I've given birth 4 times.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing how the body just takes over, especially in natural childbirth. And it's almost like you're guaranteed you're going to yell.
Yeah.
Like your body just takes over and you're going to yell.
Yes, but it's interesting because I hear from people where they're like, well, this culture, like those women never yell. And so then I went to my birth experience feeling shame of like, oh, I need to be quiet. Like, and I can remember being like apologizing for being too loud.
Wow.
Yeah. Like breathing too loud and my doctor is incredible. And even after he was like, Tara, you were not loud. And even in my follow-up appointments, I was like, I'm so embarrassed for how loud I was.
Wow.
And so I really struggle with this like thought of being like this quiet, which it's ironic because I'm not quiet at all. You know, I'm on a podcast with a mic, you know, but like this woman that is very much in control of my emotions and how I'm portraying those emotions.
Yeah. Part of what, and again, these are pretty big generalizations, so we're just kind of talking about the typical, but if you watch videos, not even porn videos, but just movies in general, you know, rom-coms, you know, this guy and a girl meet in a bar, 10, 15 minutes later, they're busting down the bathroom stall door. And it virtually always is the female that is making noise. The male virtually never does. So again, I think we just convey that message to the guy that you're supposed to be fill in the blank, whatever it is. You're supposed to be macho. You're supposed to be silent. You know, you're unmoved by this. And of course we see, you know, whatever, dozens, hundreds of movies that portray it that way, that the guy is always in control. And then the female in the movies is allowed to make noise. It's supposed to be, you know, real kind of sweet. I guess it's passionate, but it's just such a sad miseducation as far as what's actually happened. But that's why I think sometimes, that's why I sometimes think that the male has been even hindered more in his vulnerability, because he's supposed to be unfazed by this, you know, like a James Bond, a John Wayne, et cetera. But again, I think it applies for both parties.
You know, that is interesting that, you know, the rom-coms where that shows that, and it's almost like, you know, I'd love to know, where did that even start?
Right.
And I've heard, you know, almost, and I don't know, I don't know if I'm supposed to mention particular movies, like when Sally Met Harry, which is an old movie, but somehow in that the fake orgasm thing is talked about, right? And that, you know, a female faking an orgasm, it's always through noise.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think just that whole thing, it's like, it's like we've painted it a certain way. And I know, like, for us in the early years of our marriage, I was very quiet and didn't relax and didn't let go, for sure. Like, I wasn't about to do that. I was going to stay in control.
Yes.
I was so afraid of losing control. And a part of it is I didn't trust you know, I mean, I had so much fear in that.
Right.
Like, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know what might happen if I trust him and let go.
Right.
And so and I remember at some point we even having this conversation, because it was like, for Glenn, it was like a still face. He never even knew, like, are you enjoying this or not?
Right.
Like, because I was just so quiet and almost stoic and stiff, and, you know, and it's interesting because then we would watch this rom-com, and so then I felt broken. Not that I even would in those days have said that. But I was so confused, like, you know, in a sense, why does Hollywood portray it like that? Like, who is actually experiencing it like that?
Right.
Where does that even come from? And am I ever going to be capable of being free enough or relaxing enough for that to happen, you know, for me?
Yeah. I definitely had that experience of that comparison and seeing if that's what that's what I thought that it was supposed to look like, because that's the only access I had to it, you know, at one point. But also, Hollywood damaged me tremendously, because I can remember vividly seeing a scene of two guys talking about sex, and American Pie, like, all of those movies have done so much damage to me mentally. Now looking back, and it was one like that. I don't remember which one, but a guy was like mocking a girl in Orgasm. Like, he was mimicking and making these like facial expressions and all of this stuff. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, like he's making fun of her. And I never want my partner, I wasn't even married at the time, to view me that way or make fun of me that way. And so it was just like, okay, nailing a hammer, putting a nail on that one. I don't want to look like that. So instead, like you, in control, stay quiet, keep my face as like calm as possible. So Wes never has that moment where he like peeks open his eyes and sees me. Like, I'll usually put a pillow over his face, which that sounds like, I wasn't smothering him, but it's like, I need to guarantee you can't see me right now.
Yeah.
Because I have so much shame of what I could possibly look like.
Wow.
For you.
Well, I know we've talked about this before. I don't know if it's been said on a podcast, but I, for years, was like, the room had to be dark, like very dark, and not even a candle light. Like, no, because there was so much shame in it all.
Right.
Like, didn't want to me, it was like not an activity that deserved to be in the light.
Right.
And so, I'm sure there was a tremendous amount of shame in it, and fear, and just, so much confusion. And you think, wow, how many of us have suffered in silence because we don't know how to talk about this with friends and with our spouse. Like, we don't know how to engage in all of these things to really figure out, wow, that I'm not as broken as I thought I was. Others feel this way, think this way, are experiencing these emotions. And, we often, in as many opportunities as we get, is to talk about the emotion around sex.
Right.
And that, man, we don't have that language, and we definitely, for so many of us that are on the Connection Codes journey, it's such a new language to just learn to be able to speak every day to each other. And then you bring it into the sexual realm and you go, wow, never have used the core emotions in a way that communicates what's happening for me sexually.
Yeah, and this is why we stress emotional connection first, that emotional safety, for me to be able to say to you, ooh, I'm feeling fear about this, whatever this is, I'm feeling shame about this. If I don't have that language, then I'm not able to convey authentically at the core. And of course, for the longest time, we don't write these dates on the calendar, but for many, many years, probably a couple of decades, I was never able to share with you authentically what was happening for me sexually. And I think typically the male is so much more readily activated sexually and so much more readily fulfilled sexually. He can orgasm so much faster than most females. And so it looks like he's fine. And the reality is, and a female could too, but a guy can go in a closet and jerk off in a towel and very, very easily, very readily. So it looks like he's doing fine sexually. So he is having some level of functionality, but he's not really sexually connecting with his partner. So for me to not have emotional safety with you, because again, sex is a multiplier. It's incredibly vulnerable. So I have to be able to connect with you emotionally first before I'm able to share with you because of the deep, deep vulnerable state of sexuality.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And it is hard, honestly, for me. And I am bad about not giving the grace to the male species and like recognizing the parts of it that are difficult for them. Because what I see is like the guys just like walking into the room with the confidence and, like tossing their bodies around, where I'm over here trying to hide myself and trying to stay small. And one of the things that really shifted everything for me, which I'll say the late night course, when we did that, one July, oh my gosh, it was completely life-changing. But in that course, Phyllis, you talk about just allowing yourself the ability just to like breathe into it. And I think often we feel like, something may exciting be happening for us. And we just halt it because we'll hold our breath or we'll tense our bodies or we'll have an emotion of fear of not being willing to lose control. And so we stop ourselves from even experiencing any pleasure because we tense up. And you just giving that permission and just that like advice of breathe into it, and that is how you allow yourself to relax. I want to talk about that for a second, like what we can do to like help us relax and get into that frame of mind.
Well, what I love as soon as you say that is that it's kind of a phrase we've used before is find your own sexy, because I think we have been conditioned to believe that there's this cookie cutter way to look at all of this. And it's just not. It's what's between the two of you, you and your partner. It is what you create and what, and I think that even as far as what does relaxing look like, and we are all so different. And even the life that you're living, I know right now you have 4 young children. So that affects so greatly what's happening in your life.
Yeah.
And, to almost walk in and go, oh, Tira, just relax. It's like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Like what it takes to get you to relax. And, I know that probably you would say some of the best time that you have is when you and Wes are gone together.
Totally.
Or, even overnight, one night is amazing. And I remember when our kids were young and we were poor, but we figured out how to get away one night, probably every quarter. So 4 times a year. And we didn't even have family nearby. It was more that we had friends that it was like we would do that for each other and to get away for one night. And I mean, I learned how to find cheap hotels. I learned, we even wouldn't even go out to eat because we didn't have the money for that, but we would pack a picnic. But it was always the best.
Yeah.
Because it was, yes, we had great sex, and it was all about being able to just really lose yourself in it. Have the fun, knowing a kid is not going to knock at the door, that in the middle of the night, the baby's not, or the toddler's not going to cry and come. You knew you had hours to do that. So yes, those are amazing moments, and you need to make those happen. No matter where you're at in life, make those moments happen.
Right.
Well, but let's say, okay, how can we gain that on a regular basis, not just when we get to go away together? And I think that it is, and we have shared this before in our story, is that, we set aside once a week to have a sex date, which is just a very intentional, this is a night. And I remember Glenn would always put the kids to bed that night. We have some dear friends that, they have young ones as well, and his parents do live in town, and so he would take them in the afternoon, late afternoon after work or whatever. He would take them over to his parents' house just to give her a couple of hours,
right,
to relax. And she always said, first thing I have to kind of straighten everything up real quick around the house, because that matters to me. And then I have a chance to do my nails if I want to do my nails, or take a shower and, put on some makeup. She knew she had several hours. And then actually he would bring the kids back. He didn't put them to bed at his parents'. Not sure the why behind that. But he would bring them home and he would put them to bed. They wouldn't even see their mom. She would be, she would just kind of disappear. But it gave her time to get there. And then they would have their sex date after that. And she would already be so relaxed in that and be able to relax into it.
Yeah, and I want to mention something about that. For me, as a man, what the male contributes to making these new humans is non-existent virtually compared to the female. The male contributes about a teaspoon's worth, and he enjoyed doing it. The female then spends 9 months, her body being wrecked, growing this new human inside of her. All that she goes through, certainly the 9 months, physically, but also physiologically, biochemically, hormonally, so many different ways. And then really, and it varies from person to person, but certainly the next couple of years We have a lot of research on this. Females respond differently. It's just brain waves respond differently to the cry of a baby than the male does. And it's not because he's bad. It's not because he's evil. It's just biological. That's just what happens. So this woman needs time to transition from being a mom who's got one or two or three or whatever little ones clawing at her, demanding from her, requiring, these babies are dependent, 100% dependent. So they're looking to her as a mom. Well, now the guy wants this woman to transition from a mom to a lover. Well, she's going to need some transition time. You don't do that at the snap of a finger. And we missed a whole lot of things in our relationship, but somehow we figured, and that was when things were starting to turn for us relationally, but somehow we got that on straight, that you needed time to transition. And that's going to vary from person to person, situation to situation. But I would put the kids to bed. We had installed a jacuzzi in our bathroom on purpose, basically for you, just to have that time to lay in a jacuzzi, read through a non-parenting magazine. Back then we drank wine coolers, which I shudder a little bit at
I know. Doesn't that sound awful?
We thought that was on the cutting edge for us. But you needed that time to transition from being a mom, and you were an amazing mom. You're a stay-at-home mom, so you were with these kids all the time. Yeah. And for every female I've ever known, it's just not possible to snap your fingers. And now you become this, amazing lover, because you need time to transition from that.
I think that does. It plays a lot into, because if you're not relaxed going into sex, then how are you going to relax your body in sex? And so it's really setting yourself up for that. Yeah. And then for me, there's two more things. Having our room be put in order, or go into the most put in order room that you're in, because for me, clutter around me makes my brain feel crazy, and I can't relax and enjoy that. Or just turn the lights off, make sure there's no lights in the room. But just put yourself in a space that is relaxing to you. And then something else that has really changed the game for me is incorporating tools. That's what we refer to them as, toys, tools, whatever it is. But I have found that the more often I allow myself to feel good, even if in a short amount of time, the more willing I am to loosen up next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I can see, there's benefits to this, and as a mom of four, if I can get there quickly, then that also helps me relax, because I am tired and I can't commit an hour to you all the time just to get me to a point of feeling good where I can loosen up.
Yeah. And you think about the typical, certainly our journey, and of course we've sat with tons of couples, and it's a fairly similar, there's lots of variations, but so this couple, and again, if they've had some level of non-sexual involvement, so they're going to have intercourse their first night. So on the wedding night, it's not a pleasurable experience for her. Often it's a pain experience. Well, her brain remembers that. So now you've established for her that sex equals pain. Well, no wonder she doesn't want to do this again tomorrow or the next day or next week or next month again, which is exactly our story. Phyllis's body is just going, number one, no pleasure in it. Number two, there's pain in it. That or water skiing, for those of you who have heard our story. She's like, definitely let's do the water skiing. And that's true for many, many people. That it's a pain experience. There's certainly no pleasure in it, no joy. And so, the brain is not really excited about this for next time. And this is why when Phyllis and I sit with a pre-married couple, we encourage them to do late night, and we do sexual education for them before their wedding night. It is stunning to me how much damage can be done very quickly. And again, if it's a pain experience the first time that he penetrates her, guess what her brain is going to remember for a long time. And it's not because she's broken. It's not because she's mean or frigid or stupid. It's because she's smart, because her body knows, this produces pain. And so her brain goes, let's don't do that next time.
Right.
It's interesting. if I remember correctly, I was 40 years old when I started running. And our oldest was my running coach, and several of our kids were runners at that time. And kind of the idea was, Mom, do a 5K with us, and this is how you go about it. Well, what's interesting, and that's what was just popping into my mind, is that as you become a runner, there's so much talk about, loosening up your body before you start running. Stretching, it's called, stretching. And it's very specific stretching, as far as like which part of your leg do you stretch and how do you stretch it well? And I am not a patient person. Yeah. And so I am, I remember just thinking, no, just run, just head out the door and start running. I always felt that stretching was like a waste of my time. It doesn't count. Yeah. The actual run is what counts. The other doesn't count. Yeah. And of course, we all know that that's where damage happens. That's where injury happens when you don't stretch. And even after the run, you're supposed to stretch. And it's like the whole idea of there is a form. There is a good way to do this. There is, like, even the shoes that you wear, there's certain things that you do to actually be able to run and to be a good runner, or to run, without injury. And I think we, of course, because sex is not a topic that is talked about, and it's considered, almost, depending on how you were raised, shameful to talk about it, and embarrassing to talk about it, and even wrong to talk about it. So we have all this stuff coming at us. And so we are so miseducated, and we don't understand that there is a proper way. Like, it's almost like you were just mentioning, that idea of, just, for the female, especially the first time, like, just penetrate her, and sure, it's going to hurt.
I was going to say, a lot of couples, a lot of women are told, well, it's going to hurt the first time, or
totally.
2 or 10.
Yeah.
That's just kind of standard.
Yeah. You'll get used to it eventually.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And so it's like just that miseducation. But even hearing you say that brain message is, the pain says to the brain, beware, like, don't do that again. And then we're fighting. It's like we're going upstream, trying to overcome. We're fighting our own selves. Right. Our bodies are wanting to protect us. Yeah. Our mind is wanting to protect us. And so to me, I'm excited that we are, with even a podcast, being able to talk more and more just about these things. Like, how do we relax into it? Right. And whether you've been married a week or 10 years, it's like, there's so much about this message. And, if you're a listener and you have tons of questions, send them in. Like, email us. We will talk about anything on this podcast, from, emotional connection to sexual connection. And we want the very best for you. And we've learned through our own 40 years of marriage, we've come from such a broken place to where we are today. Right. And of course, Tara, I always love just your perspective and your vulnerability to be able to put it more into here and now, like the very thing that is on the table, and the topics that are very real and relevant. And, and even the fact that we started talking about this over lunch as far as the female experience, but then to also hear, wait a minute, that's such a judgment to say that, men have it easy. Right. And it's like, that's so unfair to say, oh, it's so easy for you to be vulnerable and just let go. And we've heard so much about the opposite of that, where men also have body image issues where they aren't confident in strutting out in front of us naked. And
but it typically is easier for a male to get an erection, to get to an orgasm. The problem is, and of course, there's a massive erectile dysfunction issue in our culture today, and it's now a $1 billion industry because of the lack of connection. So he was able to actually get an erection and actually have an orgasm, but that's not sexual connection. Right. And of course, our very deeply held belief is that we establish emotional connection first, then we can build dynamic sexual connection on top of that, because our goal is for this to be to better and better and better. And, we always say we want to be the gentle voice screaming in your ear. I'm 60 years old and we're starting to get good at this. And it's amazing to me because our culture basically says, oh, those old people, they're past this. No, we're starting, and we were the slow kids in the group. We got a late start. But I'm stunned by that and just amazed at the deep, dynamic sexual connection that we experience now. What's the next 10 years going to hold? I have no idea.
Yeah.
But we definitely want to be that voice. And of course, sex is basically a taboo subject in this culture. But to let people know that, no, this gets better and better, richer continuously.
Yeah. So for me, taking away from this today before we go into the core emotion wheel is really first, I think level one is knowing that you're safe with your partner. Like those guys that are mocking that girl. That's not my husband.
Wow.
He would never do that. And he constantly reassures me the joy that it brings him when he knows that I am able to relax. He's like, Tier, I could do this all day. Like nobody even has to touch me. Like I'm good. And so hearing that from him and creating this safety, and we create the safety by having such a good emotional connection and walking through our emotions together on a daily basis, definitely gives us that ability. And then step two is creating a relaxing environment, whether it's the actual room you're in or taking the break from the kids to relax your mind and your body. Another thing is don't fill your brain with things that are harmful sexually. Like I can remember one time we watched, I don't know, I'm going to say the wrong name. I want to say it was like the porn, Sharon Stone or a documentary about somebody. She was raped multiple times throughout this movie, I guess. And, or she was just like completely manipulated sexually. And afterwards, Wes was like, come on, you want to do it? I'm like, no, like that just completely took any, thought of that off the table. And so thinking of what we're putting into our brains sexually, and is this helping us? Is this connecting us? Because I watch Bridgerton and I'm like, let's go, buddy, And so making sure what you're putting in is not sending the wrong messages. And then lastly for me, get a toolbox, and whatever that is to help you feel relaxed so you can enjoy each other, but definitely starting with that emotional connection.
And that's one of our protocols with late night is just that your sexual interaction is for your benefit.
Right.
We don't know everybody that's listening to this, but that's just important that we stress that your governor doesn't get a vote, your grandmother doesn't, your neighbor doesn't. Whatever the two of you want to do that connects you sexually, have at it. Is that going to look different than some other couple? Are Phyllis and Glenn going to look different than some other couple? Yeah, I guess, but we're the only two that get to vote on us. You're the only two that get to vote on you. That's real important that people understand that, because we grew up in a heritage that says, oh, no, there's a box. There's a very clear line and you can't cross that line. No, there's no line. There's no box. Just have fun together.
And I think that's the part that's so freeing.
Yeah,
it's so freeing that we don't have to do it any way that we've ever been presented to do it before. It's truly about having the conversation together, doing the wheel about sex together to figure that out. So do y'all want to do the wheel for us? Do you want to make it a sex?
Well, I was going to say, you want to do an issue specific on sexuality?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me go first.
Good. Sure.
Okay. So for me, joy. Our sex date this week, you always laugh at me because I say, well, that was the best one ever. And how do you compare the present to the past?
Love
but
it
was just stunning. And I marvel at that after all these years, we're getting on, I don't know, just the sexual connection is amazing to me. A lot of sadness in that we missed for so many years.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, my gosh, how could we be that far off for so long? But we really did. A lot of anger in that. Anger at myself, anger at us, anger at culture, anger at our parents, our families, our churches. It's like, really, we just leave people to drown, and we just seem to not even care that, they'll figure it out. And if they don't, they crash and burn. Whoop-de-doo. Who cares? It's really sad. So much hurt. We wounded each other so much, just so much rejection from you. Just I mean,
yeah.
surely thousands of times.
Yeah,
And now the trauma, the effects of trauma that comes from that for us. Not much loneliness for me anymore because you are always there for me. It's amazing. Just
awesome.
So beautiful. And if I experience any loneliness, I just tell you, just the sexual loneliness.
Yeah.
And I love that. It just floors me that it doesn't build up. In the foundations course, talk about 43 feet. I don't think it ever gets past about 3 or 4 feet. It's amazing to me. Some fear at times, just sharing with you, my sexual fantasies and my thoughts.
Yeah.
Again, I'm so glad that I can just say to you, I'm feeling fear. You literally use the 3 phrases and you find out what's happening with my fear and what's happening with my fantasy, my thoughts, and that I'm safe to share those with you. There's some shame in that sometimes, just some of the things that I share. I certainly wasn't raised this way to be open. And again, that's why I say I think sex is equally vulnerable for men because there's so many thoughts and dreams and schemes and fantasies, and it can be so overwhelming to share those at times. And then guilt. I just hate that from the very beginning, I mean, literally and even pre-married, some of the things I missed with you, but our wedding night and our honeymoon, I was just dumb as a brick and just uneducated. I mean, literally ignorant, not really by choice. I had just been completely miseducated, and I just missed so many things and brought so much damage to you, damage to us, and it was some intense times.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. So, you mentioned this week, and I think that I feel guilt that I neglect being authentic with you and just really sharing my sexual need. And I know that, this week we started off by going for a walk, which I love. And it was earlier in the afternoon, which was so great. There, we had time. And then we went to dinner, and it was over dinner, that I started sharing just what was happening with me. But, and I know I feel anger in just how I, because of all the wounding in our early years, I still hold like that hesitancy to show up even for myself and to say, I have some sexual loneliness and to just say that to you. Yeah. So I feel anger that I am still affected by the early years of our marriage. Yeah. And now we're 40 years in. So guilt about how I don't even show up for myself and share with you, shame in that as well. That it's easy for me just to neglect and to just want it to be more about you than even me. And I expressed that this week, just felt guilt that we teach that it's a party for the female and, that the husband of course is invited. And then I'm like, I don't even, it's so, I get, I don't know, lazy in it. I whatever fear happens for me to not show up for me and to say, hey, I'm feeling sexual loneliness and I really want this week to be a dynamite party. So I think the hurt and the sad is more about the past than anything, which again, I think ties into just my guilt that I let that happen and I don't tell you about it. And then of course, tremendous joy that we just had so much fun. Like it right. And that I loved that you totally tuned in to me and were so patient with me and of course that's my experience with you, but I think fear kicks in. And so I have fear of not sharing with you authentically what's happening with me sexually. And, so yeah, that's the guilt and the shame. I could go around and around this wheel so many times because of how that affects me. And, but so much joy that yes, we had so much fun, but just that you tuned in and that you made so much space, for all that was happening with me emotionally around sex this week. So thank you.
Love it. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, that is awesome. It's awesome to hear because, I mean, I've spent now last night and today with you, and you've referenced just how great your sex date was this week. And now I'm actually getting to see insight into it was so great because you connected sexually at dinner just by talking about exactly just by
we were tempted to connect sexually at dinner, but it wasn't that type of restaurant, so we refrained.
But the emotional connection is literally what led into that incredible. Glenn's talked about it, referenced it multiple times, how incredible it was that experience this week. So that's just further proof of what the emotional connection can do for you. And so if you are listening to this, you're like, dang, I want that. I want to learn to let it loose. Like I want that emotional connection. Go to our website, connectioncodes.co, where you can find out how to get started on this journey. Either walking through the foundations course with us or the late nights course. We always recommend foundations first. So if you haven't done that, join the wait list if it's not currently open, so you can be the first to know and get in to one of our limited seats. So we would love to share this with you and what you can have. So thank y'all for being here. Share this with your girlfriends, let them know that, or your guy friends.
Yes.
Let them
No
know
judgment.
that they're not alone in what they're walking through. And give us a review.
Yeah. And more than ever, you need this.
You deserve this.
Let's do this.
Let's do this.